It's 8:49 on the 16th of December, 2021 in Beijing. Good morning, Jen.
Morning. Evening
Well, good
because
evening
it
for you.
is
Yeah, so
7:49 here in East
7:49.
Coast of the United States.
Great. So, evening to the people in the US and obviously morning for us on the other side of the world. This is the MTT News of the Week. We are now obviously on the Facebook stream too. We've been doing this for about 5 or 6 weeks now, particularly on YouTube, but we're adding it to the Facebook group too. So, which we're trying to get out. It's been going well, and we've had some good discussion. So, we are going to be covering the headlines around the world for this week, as well as different news from communist parties or workers' parties, as well as some labor updates to your news for workers, I suppose. This week is quite a lot of stories to cover, but we're not going to go into everything. Some things that did happen that would be of interest to you. So Didi, the large ride-hailing company from China, has left Wall Street. There's been lots of reports of inflationary waves going around the world, so in different places. Inflation affecting the prices of goods, so particularly Turkey, as well as the US. The prices of things are going up. A big story this week, of course, is Julian Assange is going to be extradited from the UK to the US. We'll be covering that specifically. That's a big story, very important story. China observed an anniversary of the Nanjing massacre. Obviously, in the Second World War, a massive massacre that occurred in Nanjing, committed by the Japanese. Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, has contracted COVID. We also have a report from the CIA saying that they want to recruit more Chinese speakers, more Chinese people for their efforts to create good in the world and spread democracy. Then we have obviously Nicaragua. Big news from Nicaragua. With the election that recently happened, there has been a strengthening of ties between China and Nicaragua. There's talk of the canal that plans to rival the Panama Canal, of a vaccine and a sort of vaccine sharing, and of course more integration and sort of, plans to work together in the future between Nicaragua and China. South Korea has said no to the boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics, the diplomatic boycott. France said the same last week. But also South Korea has signed a defense deal, a big deal with Australia. There was, of course, from the communist news, the extraordinary teleconference, so an online meeting of various communist parties, which we will discuss, that happened on between the 10th and 12th of December. Big news, very big news. There was the first union of a Starbucks. So the first Starbucks to unionize in the US, at least. In Buffalo. We'll be talking about that. That's some really great news, some really exciting stuff. On a sort of sadder note, there was a huge tornado in Kentucky, which has killed many, many people. We should cover this because there's a particular element about a candle factory and some workers that were forced to stay at work while the tornado was on. So we're going to be talking about that. On a lighter note, there was a huge fight in the Brazilian parliament. I think Jen described it as a 3-round MMA fight, but we'll go into that.
Yes.
There is a black box for the Earth being built in Tasmania, in Australia. So people that are perhaps less optimistic about our future are building a black box, recording various things, which I'll go into in a bit. There's been information coming out about a secret strike group that operated in Syria, run by the US, but actually with not much oversight. So it was called Anvil Talon, I believe. We'll go into that, talking about some of the crimes that they committed, killing civilians, lots of collateral damage, lots of people blown up and with very little oversight from the government and for regime change efforts in Syria. There's some news coming out about the Haitian president who was recently assassinated, and that he was allegedly going to release information about drug lords and drug cartels, and this perhaps might be why he was assassinated. There was a soccer match in Yemen, which between sort of the UAE soldiers and Saudi soldiers, and they started firing their weapons. Also, this is a separate story.
It is a soccer match of a youth league
youth league, okay.
Yemen and Saudi Arabia. And after Yemen the Yemenese team won, which was historic, first time in history. The celebration afterwards turned ugly as people, because Yemen is the country with the highest ratio of gun ownership in the world, even higher than the United States. People started unloading, firing into the air as celebration, and then stray bullets started to kill and injure civilians. I believe 5 was killed.
Yeah, pretty simple then. Okay, well, I suppose we've already covered that story. So the last story that we just need to mention is the Israeli Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, the new one, has visited or had sort of a meeting with the leaders from the UAE, which is quite a big development. That's a trend which has been going for a while. But so that's the news of the week that we've seen so far. We also got some statements to read from the CPs, which we'll read a bit later. Where would you like to start, Jen? Where do you want to begin?
I guess let's start with the U.S. Julian Assange. And, it's if we could remember back a few weeks ago, we mentioned that the Nobel Peace Prize, is being awarded to journalists that are pro-U.S. essentially. One is in the Philippines against their President Duterte, and another is a kind of traitor run away from a major communist publication in Eastern Europe, who then proceeded to just double down on supporting Navalny. So you can a Nobel Peace that, but then if you do actually good journalism, Julian Assange is an example for all of us, essentially.
Absolutely.
And all the world to see. So for context, Julian Assange was the founder of WikiLeaks, right? All the kind of U.S. classified documents he worked on getting that out and to the public, to the world.
Right, that's it. I mean, I think particularly what comes to mind for me is
in
seem to be losing.
And
1 second.
of heinous.
Seem to be losing you. Hold on. Hello. Hello there, Jen. Sorry, sorry, we just broke up there a second. Maybe.
I realized that.
Try again.
I don't know.
You were explaining who Julian Assange is and the significance of what he's done and why.
My apologies. With the whole tornado situation, I live a bit close to it. So the internet has been extremely unstable just throughout the whole city. There's not much I could do.
Okay.
Let's skip back to Julian Assange. We'll get to the tornado in a moment.
Let's go back to Julian Assange.
Essentially, it's kind of you get rewarded for praising the American empire, and you get punished for doing sincere and honest journalism. And Julian Assange, of course, ran away from the United States and took refuge
in the Ecuadorian embassy.
In the embassy, but that he could only do that for so long. After a number of years, he was extradited into Britain, and now he is going to be extradited to the United States, where very likely he will face some sort of life sentence, or possibly, if they try him with treason, then probably even death.
I think you raised some excellent points there, Jen. So, like you said, in the week, I think it was on the same day that Assange's extradition was confirmed, that he would be going from the UK to the US to face these charges for releasing information about what the US does around the world. That the Nobel Peace Prize for Journalism had been awarded to the Filipino journalist as well as the Russian journalist. And yeah, you couldn't make a more awkward day for news teams, that they had to talk about Nobel Peace Prize in journalism and fighting for the freedom of speech and how, and implying that, these things only happen in Russia, the crimes against freedom of speech and all these things only happen in Russia or China or Saudi Arabia or elsewhere. And that the US and the West is still the shining beacon on the hill in this regard, which it really isn't. And I think, to be honest, I assume most people will know who Julian Assange is and what WikiLeaks is. Just so you know, though, one of probably the most famous clip, let's say, it's quite a brutal clip. I wouldn't recommend anyone watching it. But to give you context of the kind of things that were exposed due to Assange's work, is that video where you see the live feed from an Apache helicopter, and you're seeing the group of civilians that are destroyed, killed in Iraq, and there was no immediate threat. And the language used by the pilots, it's a horrible example of what happens during these interventions that we've been experiencing or been seeing for the last 20 years. But I think it was very well hand in hand, to be honest.
Exactly.
With the next story about the Syrian strike group. So Assange is going to jail for exposing these kinds of things, civilian deaths being, collateral damage, people being killed during interventions, Western interventions into the Middle East. And at the same time, we've also had this report coming out. Various places have linked it. But talking about a secret strike group that basically answered to no one. I'm going to read the link here to you. I believe the name was called Anvil Talon. And even by American standards, this group was let's say, even less, there was less oversight than ordinary who they had to report to, how they would process the strike, the rules of engagement, all this kind of stuff. It was a lot of things were
even CIA officers were shocked at the amount of the CIA officer called what Anvil Talon was doing as unacceptable civilian collateral damage.
Right, exactly. So it was called Talon Anvil, and between 2014 and 2019, these guys basically green-lighted airstrikes on convoys, on all types of locations. Obviously, they were targeting ISIS. That was the reason for doing this. But in terms of some of the size of this group, so that sometimes it was less than 20 people, and they dropped 112,000 bombs or missiles or ordnance, in their operations over that period of time. They've obviously, people did say they were ruthlessly efficient and good at their jobs, but some of the statistics on civilian deaths, in one bombing run here, it said they killed dozens. We're talking about not just one or two groups, whole groups of children and women in these strikes. And again, oversight. It was very little oversight. And again, as we mentioned, this is the kind of stuff that Julian Assange exposed, and it still goes on. So that point about his effectiveness and his role is so poignant, even more poignant, so sharp.
I guess I do want to point out that the legacy of Julian Assange to us, all the people of the world, is really exposing and opening up the idea that, previously, in the days of pre-Julian Assange, if anyone were to say, make this kind of accusation that is open news now, to others, this would literally just have been denied. Whoever said that would have been dismissed as a kind of crazy, insane guy, But now I want to point to the fact that this has kind of almost became exactly the opposite. On the one hand, we have the kind of conventional world that says that nothing is true until officially confirmed. But
Right.
then on the other hand, these kinds of things keeps coming out, and they keep coming out to so frequently, in fact, to the point where it numbs people, to where this kind of pessimistic capitalist realism kind of sets in on people, to where
Yeah.
this kind of this idea of there's nothing we can do, so on and so forth, just sets in.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
it's a very unproductive situation, no matter how you look at it. And that's something truly kind of exceptional. Because historically, if there was a kind of a negative event, negative example, what
Yeah.
people did was to see it as a negative example of a what not to do, and then to learn, or to try to learn from such things. But now we have effectively, ever since Edward Snowden leaked the Prism Gate and the entirety of what the NSA does, it's just that at this point people are just completely numb, desensitized to these things, and that's kind of what I fear the most, really, because
Yeah.
we this week we are along with all the previous other weeks covering all sorts of disasters and tension and war. Yeah, it's kind of leading to this point where people are kind of feeling so powerless, to the point where it's becoming un-Leninist, right? A part of the Leninist philosophy is to for the working class and the working masses to take the center stage of the world, and to become its new rulers, and to become the kind of new center of conversation of the whole world. But now it's getting to the point where people are just kind of suppressed from all these kinds of things, to the point where it's really becoming unrevolutionary. But it's this kind of, I would say that we need to change our mindset on that, so that we can still look at the world honestly in its face, without just resorting to depression and anxiety attacks.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the good thing is we have some good news this week, so it's not all doom and
Yeah.
gloom. I agree with you entirely.
Mhm.
That, yeah, we have to look at the facts and reality, and sometimes these things can be overwhelming and
Right.
can demotivate us and all these things.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, we still need to know what's going on. We need to know exactly
Yeah.
the situation.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think just as we finish with this strike group stuff, the point that always sticks to me when we read about stuff related to the Syrian intervention is you have or had, well, no, still have, I should say, boots on the ground. You've got Green Berets,
Yeah.
Delta Force, all these sort of soldiers, and from all over NATO. It's not just the US forces.
Mhm.
There'll be all of NATO special forces have probably played some role in Syria and Iraq.
Mhm.
Iraq, sure, you have the consent of the government. Okay, fine, it's a puppet government or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But Syria, it's always odd. When was
Right.
when was the US, when were the American people have asked, we want to send soldiers to Syria? There was never a
Yeah.
moment where, and also the point of invading. So we all remember the invasion of Iraq. We all remember the invasion of Afghanistan, and so on and so on. But there was
Mhm.
never a point where we went, okay, we're going to Syria. It just happened. It became this nebulous war on terror, and it became sort of, oh well, there's a no-fly zone. We're discussing, Assad has done this. Okay, so the troops are going there, but it was never clear, like, this is the policy.
Mhm.
It's kind of,
Yeah.
we have these moments where a particular strike, like the time Trump ordered the cruise missile strikes on Assad's air bases, but there was never a point where we all agreed and knew that there'd be soldiers, U.S. soldiers in Syria, without pretty
Right.
much the consent of the Syrian. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think we'll move on from this stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
Empire does what Empire does, and
Yes.
that's what we know so far. We've known for a long time. Let's
And
move on
I
to the good
was
news. Of course,
Mhm.
yeah. Go ahead.
I would say that all of the kind of labor issues that has came up is also that we probably will cover later, is also a part of exactly what you said. Empire does what Empire does.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, let's move on to that. I was going to bring that up. This is the
Mhm.
good news. So maybe, well, actually, maybe let's deal with this. The negative side first
Mhm.
of labor relations, or a labor related story
Yeah.
in America, and then we can try and move on to a positive note. The tornadoes, obviously, you're not far from there, Jin.
Yeah.
As I'm sure most people know, there was a huge tornado in Ohio and Kentucky, but mainly in
Kentucky primarily, but also just all throughout the
primarily,
Midwest.
yeah, all the other Midwest. This particular huge hurricane ripped through a town in Kentucky, and the sort of largest bulk of the casualties or people that were killed as a result of this tornado were in a candle factory. And the sort of negative or sort of terrible story that is from this is that they were told initially to go home because there was a warning. Then the boss said that it was a false warning, that no, you should stay and work. And if you do go home, I will fire you. So they all stayed at work and worked in the candle factory. And then, this big tornado hit, and many of them died in the factory, in their workplace. The boss is now denying that he ever said that. Now we have to go into an investigation and confirm everything and whatnot. But I mean, they were in the factory during a tornado. That's a fact.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
yeah.
As long as because of how the just American and British law works, as long as the boss continues to deny that he ever said such thing, even if he hypothetically did, and then as long as he put in some money to hire a good lawyer, then he will be able to get out of this free, essentially. And it's quite two things actually. One is that I would definitely for sure say that this is the result of climate change. Why? Well, because here in Cincinnati today, it is December 15th, in the middle of winter.
Sure.
Temperature is in the 70s Fahrenheit, 20 plus degrees Celsius.
Okay.
This is not normal. So leading up to it, I remembered that kind of just taking out the trash that day, hey, it is really strangely warm today. And then immediately for us, it proceeded to rain for 24 hours. 24 hours straight, non-stop rain. High intensity rain. And so, of course, that's what did it. As we can see, the outcomes of that has led to such a okay, it's partly preventable, but partly also unpreventable, because the intensity of the tornado, to be fair, has reached such a level that it demolished, erased entire towns quite literally to the ground.
Sure.
Of course, we kind of would like to see justice for that, for the workers' situation. But in addition, I want to bring attention to kind of if anyone has paid attention to the disaster rescue efforts kind of put in. Essentially, it's I would describe it as like a borderline feudal kind of a system. Essentially, what has happened is that each and every mayor and judge, so the lords of every county, has pledged their full support to the governor, Governor Beshear of Kentucky, which will result in, on average, 20-ish people per county that's near the region, and however much vehicle that they can come up with. So on average, at the time, this was a few days ago, they haven't reported that much on the situation now, but at the kind of 12-hour after the disaster, there was only like 170 police, 170 emergency medical, 170 National Guards kind of helping out the situation. And there is kind of this very kind of soft implication of other kind of civilian groups from out of states to not intervene and provide aid, because of basically implied that the police and the National Guards are trying to lock down the area, and if those groups come, they will probably just ask you to leave.
Right.
And it's, again, not to kind of put too much of a point on, on this moment of tragedy, but if a disaster like this were to happen in a socialist country, they would
Mhm.
be getting a lot more help, a lot more heavy
Yeah.
equipment, a lot more manpower, so on and so forth. Not
Yeah.
this like 20 something person per square kilometer kind of
Right.
utter
Right.
nonsense when
Yeah.
hundreds of people are trapped under
Mhm.
ruins.
Sure.
This
Sure.
is absolutely just when the worst manifestation of when an empire does what an empire does.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know that Biden did release extra FEMA funding, but I do remember hearing the numbers. Yeah, you said it was a
Mhm.
small, tiny group of National Guard deployed. And yeah, if you think of stuff that, if I recall, Cuba and also China, when there's been a national disaster or a
Mhm.
tragedy or whatever, um, the troops are on the ground, they're filling up sandbags
Yeah. And
covering.
so for civilians, there would be civilian effort from all across the country to go help.
Yeah,
Massive efforts of a massive
yeah,
convoys that would get people would kind of they wouldn't
yeah.
be charged any toll fees, and people would give them food and
Mhm.
try to help however they can. Versus like whatever this is, okay,
Mm, mm.
yeah.
Yeah, let's. So I mean, let's talk about the good news. Let's see
Mhm.
the lesson to be learned. The lesson to be learned is that if your boss is in a position to force you to stay at work during a tornado overnight, perhaps, I mean, I assume it was nighttime, but
Mhm.
anyway, a big lesson we can learn here is that workers need to seize more power,
Yeah.
and the Starbucks union that has just been formed in Buffalo is a great source of inspiration. This is a great moment
Mhm.
we're seeing here. So yeah, it was a small little Starbucks, nothing, not a huge workplace, but still, it's
Mhm.
still a victory against
Yeah.
one of the biggest corporations, one of the biggest symbols of modern culture, Starbucks, all over the world.
Yeah.
So obviously, I just want to clarify: there used to be unionized Starbucks in the 80s. I didn't know this, but
Mm.
yes, they were. But yes, so 5 days ago, it was the staff at the Elmwood Avenue Starbucks in Buffalo. There were
Mhm.
27 staff and 19 voted in favor of unionization. Of course, like we said, small numbers, but it's a big deal.
Oh,
And it's
as
blown.
about as big as what an entire county can manage for a rescue force.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's apparently more, yeah, bigger than
I'm
the
sorry.
National Guard deployment to Kentucky. But yeah, so obviously they had a vote, and they counted it over Zoom, and they were pretty happy. Um, you know, another Buffalo store did vote against forming a union, but I have been reading that the efforts that Starbucks went to try and stop this from happening, probably comparable to what Amazon went through to try and stop the unionization effort that attempted to happen
Yeah.
there a few months ago, which was
Yeah.
not successful. They're talking about bullying and intimidation. Yeah, so it's 4 months. They've been trying to persuade them to stop.
Mhm.
Uh, even executives. So that the founder was flown in. So I mean, you think about this: 27 workers, right? 27 baristas who make coffee. Want to
Mhm.
form a union, a tiny little shop, and that merits
Attracted the
the
attention of.
executive and the founder of Starbucks. I mean, I assume everyone knows how big Starbucks is. Starbucks is everywhere, almost everywhere. I mean, it's in China, it's in all of Europe, it's massive in the UK. I mean, they do it. I think there's a couple in South Africa, but it's you're talking about one of the biggest companies in the world, huge. To
Mhm.
have the executive founder fly into a 27-man store is just it's crazy. This shows
Mhm.
you how much of a big deal this is to the
Yes.
executives, to the bigwigs. Um, Sometimes he even met them individually. So you'd meet individual people. I mean, that's like the equivalent of the president coming to your house to
Right.
stop your
Exactly.
particular tiny little vote. But yeah, so it's
Uh-huh.
called Workers United, SB Workers United, Starbucks Workers United. That's the name of the union. And this, I mean, let's see what else we've got here. So we've got. I'm talking about the bully intimidation as well, but yeah, so they're also talking about the fact that they are raising the minimum wage of Starbucks to $15 an hour. That was an attempt by that will happen. Sorry, by next
Right.
summer. The coffee chain trying to stop this kind of unionization efforts.
Wow. When I applied for work, Starbucks offered $8.73 an hour.
Oh, how much? $8 and what?
73 cents.
Luxury, mate. Luxury. That's more than enough money. Come on.
Oh.
But yeah, so nearly half of what they would be paying next year.
Yeah.
I mean, I do like this, that one of the banners was partners becoming partners. So Starbucks describes its staff as partners, which is obviously ridiculous because they're
Right.
probably 0-hour contracts, probably what you would call precarious working conditions, right? There's not much guarantee and whatnot.
Mhm.
So so now they're partners becoming partners, real partners now. But anyway, this has been great though. This has been really good, and obviously now we're seeing already. If you check on the Twitter of SB Workers United, they are they've got 20,000 followers now, and they have inspired, it seems, many other Starbucks workers to do that. So we're seeing one in Boston.
Two is starting in Boston, right?
Boston, they're pushing for it. It's going to take time, and to be honest, actually, the work really now starts, because it's all well and good unionizing one small Starbucks, but really, you need to build that movement. So they've got. I do feel I'm very inspired by these guys, these 27, and of course they're referring to them as Gen Zers who are doing this, but I think there's probably a spread of different ages in that group. But they've got a big task. They're going to be going up against. They are, and they have been going up against, but they will be now facing a longer struggle. I wouldn't be surprised if, through whatever means, there are attempts to shut down that particular branch. They are now in the eyes of. And not just Starbucks. This is not just the Starbucks. Not only Starbucks is going to be looking at this. Every single big corporation. Retail. I mean, every retail. So, obviously other coffee shops too, Tim Hortons, and, Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's workers. This is a big thing for all of them, as well as then Amazon too. So this is going to be in the eyes of all of that class. All of the owning class are going to be looking at this, the corporate class. So this is class war.
The American economy is dominated by finance economy and their extension, which is service economy. So it's very interesting for to see how much or like how this entire situation would even play out, because historically when we're talking about unions, you're more talking about like production, industrial
miners,
kind of workers.
Right.
Yeah. So in this, I mean, it's very interesting to observe. That's all I'm going to say for the moment, because how much power does the 21st century Western kind of deindustrialized service worker actually have? And what kind of conceptual understanding that actually we are that these workers are actually capable of? That's tremendously interesting to observe.
Sure. Yeah, well, so I mean, good luck to these comrades, these fellow workers at Starbucks. Let's hope that they can go from strength to strength, and more people can unionize at Starbucks around the world and fight back. And I think, just going on from one of the headlines we did read at the beginning, the inflationary wave, so particularly inflationary wave hitting the US now, this is creating good conditions for unions to then argue, and their cases are easier to fight for if there's more inflation. They can say, hey, you're paying more money for goods, you need to get paid more money at work. And this is good stuff for building class consciousness. This is good. Okay. We wanted to talk about Didi leaving Wall Street. So let's get into that. So what are your thoughts on this, Jen? So what happened? Explain to us what happened.
Yeah, for the longest time, it was a massive kind of conversation in China in regards to security, digital security. Essentially, one of the prerequisites for Didi to trade in America on Wall Street was that it to open up its all of its GPS location data to the United States, NSA, and so on and so forth. And that is essentially seen as by majority of the Chinese public as just prima facie treason. Because the older incident version of this kind of incident, though on a smaller scale, was in fact Pokemon Go. Essentially, Russia observed that the United States intelligence community was meddling with the data of Pokemon Go to the point where it would show up Pokemon's near restricted access locations. So it would incentivize people to go near military bases with their phone.
Yeah, and with the camera on.
With the camera on, correct. That's exactly correct. So this is just another one of that, and it's a kind of seen in China as a case where capital is would much rather choose profit over security or their nation or the people or any other kind of things that people regard as sacred. So there has been huge backlash and pressure for Didi to not do that and to even potentially nationalize them. That's been the talks in China for months now. So now at least they pulled back from Wall Street, but I doubt we'll be able to get any material confirmation of just how much GPS data has already been leaked to the United States by them.
Right.
So even though they claimed that they haven't done that yet, but you can, these days you can get away with claiming anything. So that's pretty much the situation on that.
No, I think you've done a great summary of that. I don't think I want to add anything to this. It's it ties into the bigger stuff, right? So the trade war and geopolitics and empire, and obviously the struggle for who is the hegemonic power. Although I guess from the Chinese perspective, they don't have any plans to be a hegemonic power, but nonetheless, okay. Obviously, in China, since we're already talking about Chinese news, observing the Nanjing massacre. I think this is particularly interesting because it's still. In Japan, there's still a bit of reluctance to accept or talk about or to maybe acknowledge what happened, the atrocity that happened there. I mean, you're Chinese, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, from the research that I was able to do on this situation, so what typically tends to happen is that since Japan is politically after the war set up like the United States, where everything is like from county to county basis, from state to state basis. Due to the fact that the Japanese right wing was never their high elite militaristic war criminals were never truly held responsible for anything. They still held massive economic and political power, right? So the result of that is that from county to county, from province to province, the educational content is different, just like American schools. So they have been going around trying their best to promote through just discounts and bribery with the education boards and teachers and whatnot to make sure that the Japanese children uses their version of history textbooks, which puts Japan as the victim of World War II, in fact. Their version of the story is quite literally Japan got sanctioned by the United States for oil, and Japan was starving, so for that they had to fight the Americans and got nuked. It mentions nothing about all the war crimes that they have committed all across Asia. Korean, Chinese, Filipino, so on and so forth person will be able to tell you all about it. It's not just a singularized thing. And so after that, the United States basically is like during the Cold War covered it up, because basically saying that oh, that's just Chinese communist propaganda and whatnot. Well, if you think that telling the truth is propaganda, then there's something wrong. There's something seriously wrong, right? So today, what this has manifested into is essentially with the decline of the United States, Japan is, in contemporary context, what's relevant now is that they are massively ambitious with building up their military empire again. So right after U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan, the United States basically like asked all its allies to put on a show of force to show essentially China and Russia that, hey, we're still in this, we're not weak or anything. Wink, wink. Japan was essentially the craziest one of them all. What did they do? They pulled together out of the middle of nowhere, a tactically not so meaningful but politically very meaningful military exercise, where they just all of a sudden out of nowhere mobilized 3 million, 3 million soldiers, troops, for this basically like this massive car ride, driving from point A to point B, and that kind of stuff, with no real tactical intent, because the situation assumes conflict with China, but conflict with China is going to be done on the ocean and very, very small islands where at the most you can fit like three
small groups,
2 to 3 battalions. So like what the hell is 3 million soldiers doing? That's not 3 battalion. That's anyways, so and they've been talking, there's lots and lots of rounds of talks about rebuilding the military industrial complex in Japan, producing more and more jet fighters. They need more jet fighters, they need more ships, they need more everything to basically awaken their imperialist militaristic dreams. So that's what we're seeing. The newest event of that last week, we didn't cover this. They were commemorating the Pearl Harbor attack just as well as the Americans, but they're doing it from the perspective of well, it was like 300 right-wing Japanese politicians went to the Japanese war criminal shrine as like a good thing, as like Japanese pride. That's what's happening last week.
That's I didn't know that. Right.
That's the situation.
Okay. Interesting thoughts then on that. Okay, so that was obviously for the Nanjing massacre commemoration. Just talking about the network of allies, let's call them allies, that the Americans have on the eastern side of Asia, which is
Indo-Pacific.
The Indo-Pacific, yes. The Indo-Pacific. Just on some things, I suppose some developments we should mention is obviously that South Korea did say no to the boycott, which is which shows that the alliance, if you want to call it that,
of the Beijing Winter Olympics.
Yeah, of the Beijing Winter Olympics, yes, the boycott of that, the diplomatic boycott as well, not the actual sports boycott. That yes, last week the US said that they were boycotting it, and I don't know who's joined on the bandwagon, but no one that seems to have been.
Well, Australia did.
Australia did, okay. Yes. Australia did, but South Korea didn't. So it's almost a kind of it's a little bit of a communication test to see who's willing to join, who's got the sort of who's the most loyal of the allies of America, of the Indo-Pacific Alliance, or the Atlanto-Pacific. I don't know what to call things anymore. Indo-Atlanto. The Indo-Atlanto.
Atlanto-Pacific? You mean like all of the ocean?
No, it's a new geopolitical term. The Atlanto-Pacific. Yeah, that's what it is. Okay, but anyway,
yes.
So South Korea didn't join that boycott. I think we should maybe move on to then on the other side. So talking about, if we're going to put the world into these camps of who's on this side and who's on that side, Nicaragua, obviously, having just had the election that they did with the Sandinistas winning and being able to reassert themselves. We're seeing stronger ties with China. They have not. They've stopped their recognition of Taiwan, and I think you should go ahead. I think you mentioned this. You've got something to say about this. Go ahead.
It's the United States has basically weakened. We were talking about this with the pink tide, if people remember back to the previous episodes. Essentially, this has gotten to a point where So for background, the Sandinistas were the original kind of true revolution in Nicaragua in response and to all the kind of sufferings of the local people. And then, the United States launched the Contras program. I would recommend all of our audience to check out Abby Martin's Empire Files documentaries, specifically the one on the School of the Americas. So, long story short, School of the Americas is a facility, a program at Fort Benning, Georgia. It's a United States Marine Corps training base, but it's more than just that. It is where they basically select the most depraved individual out of the entire South American society, and they train them in sabotage, manipulation, coercion, assassination, and torture. And then they send these people, in quotation marks, back to all these South American countries where it was during the started during the Ronald Reagan years, where they see a potential for a communist uprising, to the point where they would be they would be funded by the American military, of course, under a United States military South America Command, which its icon is literally like the ship of Columbus. So colonization. To where they would kill, torture, coerce anyone and everyone, and they were understand that these were never popular with the South American peoples. They just were the de facto governments, and as time went on, they became the de facto government, right? But their brutality only gave more and more fuel to the Sandinista movement because, the people hate them. Not much dissimilar to what the Japanese did in my homeland, honestly, with these School of the Americas operatives. So in order to put that kind of rebellion down, America finally realized that it has to do this by pacifying the local population, and they did that by building infrastructure, schools, hospitals for the locals in order to win them over, right? Hello, Alex. Alex is a good friend of mine, and is one of our viewers, who's saying hi to us. Essentially, it's gotten to the point where everything that's built there, in terms of like official infrastructure, is sided with the Americans. That is why, in fact, these South American countries recognized Taiwan instead of the official instead of the China, right? People's Republic of China. So now for record, it's the School of the Americas in Fort Benning, Georgia, where they train the dictators and drug lords, basically. Who then sent to the entire Middle and South America. To continue on with this, now that the Sandinistas have won a victory for the people, of course that's out of the window. Of course it is. Yeah, and it's it's one of the great things that's happening to the world. They are a socialist government, and they are even a regular centrist party would be miles ahead of the schools of the America operator governments. But like to get like the Sandinistas to be in charge, that's truly a pleasant surprise for all of the world.
It is great. I mean, actually, I think if anyone watches this, we've got the documentaries, the Contra, One Man Contra Scandal videos, which are pretty, if you're looking on YouTube, you'll see them next to our channel on the videos there.
Right.
There is a series, and it goes into this, the schools of America stuff. That particular stuff. And talking about the record of those governments, I mean, we always hear about immigration into the US from the southern border, and predominantly these people come from those Central American countries where the schools of America governments have been set up. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding. If you have 1 million people leaving that region every year, the government
must be right.
No, it must be pretty poor governance. So the school of the Americas is not creating great students. Let's say that. Just going back to this thing.
Great, just not in the way that
not for people.
All of us people think about.
Ordinary people. Yeah, great for businesses and for the corporate class, but not for ordinary folks, and particularly people of Central America. But I mean, this is quite a big switch, quite a big moment having for the Republic of China to lose one of the only 14 now governments that recognize it as a country. And obviously Nicaragua taking the position of the PRC. I mean, I was just reading about this canal situation here. So the canal has been delayed for a number of years. So this is the Nicaragua Canal that was supposed to be built. It started. It was a back and forth. The investor sort of lost his money. There was a stock market crash and all of these details. But perhaps we'll see whether that will come back online. They'll set that back up, which would be interesting to see. Okay. So that's Nicaragua. Good for them. I think what else would you want to cover there, Jen? Is there anything that let's go on something fun. We've got something interesting here to talk about, which is the Brazilian fight in Parliament. So tell us about this. What happened here?
Tragedy and comedy often goes hand in hand. One representative and one mayor of the region of Manaus, Brazil, had so much political disagreements that they arranged basically I would say an MMA fight, or at least kickboxing. Not that they're martial artists, so I can't really tell.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, no, so I'm just looking at what you said here. This is not just they had a fight in Parliament.
Also footage, by the way. No. They arranged a cage fight and live.
Okay, so let's clarify. I think this should clarify. It's a bit misleading because there's many times that people will talk about a fight in Parliament or a fight in a government office, and like one punch was thrown and it's caught on video in the Parliament. This has happened a few times in like Ukraine and South Africa and many places, but this is a bit different. They organized staged, live-streamed cage fight. The mayor of the Amazonian town of Borba and the ex-councillor settled their differences in a boxing match. Well, an MMA fight in a cage. Wow. Okay. Wow. This is... let's just take a look here. So the mayor of Borba, which is a small town 90 miles south of Manaus, challenged the councillor called Erneo da Silva in September, who also goes by the nickname Mirico. He was obviously angry that the mayor had failed to conserve a water park near a river, and then demanded that they had a fight and called him a rotten and crook and stuff like this. Oh man, okay.
Who won? Did they say?
I'm just going to go here. Take a look here. Let's see who won. Okay, so there was obviously a lot of posturing. I'm not a street fighter. I'm the mayor of the municipality of Borba. And but if you really wants to fight, we're ready to fight, and I'll always be a winner. A month later, on the hours of Sunday, the fighting commenced with hundreds of paying spectators.
Was it like $112 for a ticket?
Yeah, people paid tickets. It was in this local school, and they started the fight at 2:30 in the morning. And of course, the Peixoto walked on with a towel that said Jesus on it. Great stuff. And there we go. And of course, there was lots of gesturing towards each other. 13-minute fight. Borba's conservative mayor, he landed several painful blows in the opening seconds. The 39-year-old briefly knocked Miracle to the ground, but he fought back. Miracle got up. After 3 shambolic rounds, the mayor was almost unable to walk because of the number of low kicks he received from his adversary. Then the mayor took a beating. His jaw dropped. And then somehow Miracle lost on points. And people say it was a stitch-up.
Yes, there was referees.
Not a knockout. But it seems that the mayor had been losing. He'd been kicked. He was staggering. But then they went to points.
I want to point out the fact that why I brought up the fact that it might be a tragedy. It is because Manos, if anybody recall, I do not know if we have mentioned this in our shows per se, but Manos was the kind of is this isolated town in the middle of the Amazon rivers.
Sure.
That has no traffic to the outside besides boats and airplanes. And the COVID situation was an absolute nightmare.
Right.
They were running out of oxygen tanks.
Venezuela sent them oxygen. Yeah.
That was quite a long time ago, about a year ago. And that was the place where the first scientific reports started to come out about how herd immunity was not going to be a thing because people kept getting reinfected instead of what at the time Western scientists assumed that if you get infected once, then you'll be immune for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And also, I think this is where this was the first time we heard of a variant. It was Brazil.
Yes, exactly.
This is actually quite an interesting little town.
So, like, for 2 pretty significant, I would say, officials of that region to not only not care about that, but to put yourself up as, like, spectacles, to not only not help the people, but do a Logan Paul versus KSI style fight.
Yeah, it's pretty.
All I can say is shame on them. That's a tragedy. For
I mean, it's not. People. I think people make their own minds up. I
mean, YouTubers, okay, that's fair enough. It's a bit, like boxing fans say, it's a bit of an insult to the sport of boxing. But besides that, there really isn't much negative things you can say about it. People do what they want, right? But like this is clearly different.
Yeah, right. No, these are supposed to be elected officials. These people are supposed to be leading towns, setting the standards, inspiring people, trying to lead. This is a leadership role. Councillors and mayors. So a boxing match, 3-round match where 2 men in their late 30s or early 40s, however they all are, fighting. Not really a good sign.
Form, by the way.
That a boxing match is how to solve stuff. But anyway, let's talk about the news from different communist parties around the world. So this week we have lots of messages in relation to the extraordinary teleconference of the IMCWP. If there's not enough letters in there, then
of the alphabet soup
of all the letters. There's lots of messages there. So we'll read one of those to you in a moment. But other news that did come up from different CPs and workers' parties around the world. In South Africa, there was the SACP welcomed the Competition Commission's findings on overly priced COVID-19 PCR tests. So they're obviously happy that the Competition Commission has done that people were price gouging on COVID-19 tests, which is pretty despicable. Then CP of Venezuela is talking about the liberation of workers that were unjustly detained in Venezuela. I haven't got time to cover that this week, but obviously that's just what they're discussing. But let's read one of the teleconference messages. We've got contribution from the Philippines. We've got contribution from the KKE. And we also have one from, this is a joint text of actions. Let's read this one here. So this is the joint text of actions from the extraordinary teleconference of the IMCWP. Not too long, so I'll actually read this. It's not too long. So, text of joint actions. The Communist and Workers' parties in 2022 will develop joint and convergent actions on the following main axes. 1. Support of the struggles of the working class for workers' people's rights, including millions of immigrant workers. Utilization of 1st of May for the promotion of demands for the right to work, health, education, culture, for the protection of the unemployed, for decent salaries and pensions, in solidarity with immigrants and refugees for their rights to live and work on equal conditions against racism and xenophobia. 2, for protection measures against the pandemic and the reinforcement of public healthcare systems, for the waiver of patent protections for all COVID-19 vaccines and medicines that are being used or developed, for ensuring that all people, especially the poorest countries and the poor popular strata, have access to them, for highlighting the anti-popular and ineffective management of the pandemic by capital, which has turned into an opportunity for further exploitation of workers and greater profitability of monopolies. 3, against activities against anti-communism and the distortion of the historical contribution of the USSR and socialism, utilizing milestone anniversaries such as the founding of the USSR on the 30th of December 1922, so next year is the 100th anniversary of the foundation of the USSR. Solidarity with communists and militants faced with persecution and bans against dictatorial regimes, repression, restrictions, and discriminations as regards democratic rights and freedoms in order to end the unacceptable regime of persecution and bans on communist parties. In solidarity, so number 4, in solidarity with people's mobilizations against the degradation and destruction of the environment caused by the anarchy of the capitalist production and the race for business profit. 5, initiatives to promote the necessity, timeliness, and realistic character of socialism as the only alternative to capitalism in favor of the workers and the peoples in the contemporary conditions. 6, in support of Cuba, its people, and the Communist Party of Cuba against the interventions and undermining plans of imperialism for the end of the unacceptable US blockade against Cuba. 7, with the people of Palestine for the end of the occupation and in favor of self-determination, establishing a national independent state with occupied East Jerusalem as its capital, and for the return of the refugees in accordance with the UN resolutions such as the 194 resolution of the General Assembly of the UN, supporting the resistance of the Palestinian people, condemning the criminal policy of Israel and the imperialist proposal of the so-called deal of the century, and for the release of all political prisoners. 8, solidarity with the peoples struggling against foreign occupation, blockades, sanctions, machinations, and imperialist aggression. 9, support for initiatives developed by pro-peace and anti-imperialist movements for peace and sovereignty against militarism, imperialist wars and interventions, NATO and other imperialist military alliances, and foreign military bases. What am I on now? 9? I can't remember. 9, 10. Okay, 10. Condemnation of the preparation for new imperialist interventions at wars such as those foreshadowed by the concentration of mass NATO military forces on the borders with Russia that also utilize the provocative plans of the reactionary Ukrainian regime against the people of Donbass. And the last one, the Communist and Workers' parties expressed the need to reinforce their cooperation at a bilateral and regional level and strengthen the efforts to hold these 22nd IMCWP within 22, taking into consideration the developments around the pandemic. Okay, that's it. That's the joint text of actions by the IMCWP extraordinary teleconference. Yeah, great points there. I don't think I disagree with any of that. And also doing a good job. I mean, communists don't agree on everything. We'll probably disagree on more and argue more and talk more and like to write more. But I think they've picked points there that everyone can agree with. Palestine, Cuba, NATO, resisting NATO interventions. I did think the waiving of the patent protection, so these patents that are on COVID-19 vaccinations and other medicines, waiving those protections, that is a great point to bring up to get us out of this pandemic and move on. And yes, good point there. It's the 100th anniversary. So next year, a year from now, more or less, it's the 100th anniversary of the founding of the USSR. And it's important to uphold and defend history and defend truth regarding. Yes, but I think it's been a very successful week for workers in some regards.
In some regards,
yes. The tragedy in in Kentucky, obviously, with workers being forced to stay, is a lesson to learn and something to take from that. But workers in Buffalo, young Gen Zers who have set up their union have also set an example, a good lesson for us to learn. Any closing remarks before we finish for today, Jin?
Well, just the dialectics of the world. Good things, bad things, and got to find the right things to do. Yeah, that's it.
Sure. I think next week, something that I'd like to read is a particular piece that we couldn't cover this week was Biden's very poorly covered and quite marginal, what was it? The Conference of Democracy, the Summit of Democracy, which we didn't mention. We'll cover that. There's something I'd like to read, which was published in the Global Times. Very interesting, talking about democracy, what democracy means, what is democracy, and different forms of democracy. So we'll read that.
Spoiler alert: democracy is when you count votes. All right.
Anyway, but thank you everyone for watching this, and we'll catch you next week at the same time. Thank you very much, Jen.
Thank you. Bye-bye.